Chapter 11. Webbed. Shelley's father flipped on all the kitchen lights. "Hey, you okay? I heard you scream." He wore pajamas, and his hair was tousled from sleep. Shelley looked at him in a panic, clawing at her neck, but nothing was wrapped around it. Fortunately, her father was still half asleep, and it was dark, so he couldn't see her gills. But that was the least of her troubles. She had almost drowned in the kitchen sink, which, now that she looked at it, was empty. No black ink or plastic garbage in sight. I think I was sleepwalking," she stammered. The lies slipped from her lips. He screwed up his mouth. "Everything okay?" "No. Yes, I'm fine," she said, working to slow her breathing. Her father grabbed a glass and filled it from the tap, and she watched, frozen in horror. But only clean water filled the glass. Shelley breathed out in relief as her father took a slow drink. Once the glass was empty, he grinned and held it up to the light. "I don't know why everyone insists on buying expensive filters these days," he said. "Triton Bay tap water is crystal clear, and it tastes great." Shelley smiled and rubbed her eyes. "Right. Yeah. Well, I'll just be heading back to bed." Shelley didn't sleep a wink. All night she listened for the steady drip, drip, drip of the kitchen faucet. She kept thinking about the seaweed wrapping around her, pulling her into the contaminated water. Finally, morning arrived. She threw back the covers and ran her hands through her hair. But something felt weird. Her hair was snagged between her fingers. She pulled them back to inspect them, and her stomach dropped. No, it couldn't be. Her fingers were webbed. Panicking, she glanced at her feet. They were webbed too. Thin, translucent skin stretched between her fingers and toes, connecting them. Terrified, she waited for Dawson to get up and leave the room, then rustled through the hall closet until she found an old pair of her father's work gloves. Combined with a scarf, it was the best she could do to hide her new abnormalities. She knew she looked ridiculous, but fortunately her family wasn't the type to judge her various clothing phases. Across the kitchen table, her father eyed the old work gloves paired with the wool scarf. "The new fashion trend, eh?" he chuckled. "Back in my grunge days, I wore my dad's work boots and flannel to school." He patted her on the back, making her worry about the scarf would slip down. "Glad my old gloves are good for something," he added with a wink. The aquarium, which usually cheered Shelley up, wasn't any better than her sleepless night. Instead of chatting with the staff while they worked or feeding the dolphins or reef sharks or any of her favorite sea animals, she searched for somewhere to hide. The tunnels under the main exhibit seemed like a good choice. She entered the dark corridor. It was lit only by the eerie light that filtered through the water, casting strange shadows. Fish and other marine animals darted past the portholes. The taunts of Fish Lover echoed in her head. She tried to shake it. "Maybe they're right," Shelley whispered to her reflection. "This is where I belong." She pressed her face to the glass, feeling alone and misunderstood. Every fish that swam past reminded her of what was happening. Her eyes fixed on the sunken pirate ship and the Triton. The Triton was covered in barnacles, but underneath she caught a shimmer of gold. That Triton was old and warped. How could it be shimmering like that? She studied the forked spear. It happened again. Another flash of light. Another shimmer of gold. Suddenly, a tentacle slapped the glass. Shelley jumped back with a start. But it was only Queenie again. At least this time Shelley knew she wasn't losing her mind. Queenie was real. The Sea Witch? Well, she couldn't be real. But then how else could Shelley explain her webbed digits and the neck gills? She shuddered. The octopus floated by the porthole, almost as if she was saying hello. Her long tentacles undulated. "Hey, Queenie," Shelley said. At this point, the octopus was practically becoming her best friend. Do you know what's happening to me? The octopus seemed to shake her body as if answering no, but Shelley knew it was only an optical illusion caused by the water. Yeah, me neither, Shelley whispered. I didn't mean for this to happen. Not like this. Glancing around to make sure she was alone, she slowly peeled off her glove and studied her hand. Webbing stretched from each finger. When she touched it, it felt like her own skin. She pinched it and winced at the sting. She couldn't even bear to take off her sneakers to look at her toes. Tears pricked her eyes, hiding in the dark by the fish. She sank down to her knees and wrapped her arms around herself. She didn't notice the figure watching her from the corridor. He had heard everything she'd say. Hey, Shelley, is everything okay? She looked up startled. Her eyes fell on Enrique, who was leaning against the wall in the shadows, and she yanked the glove back on. She stood up and looked at him, shame and fear fixed in her gut. Why did he keep surprising her like that? Didn't he have better things to do? How long have you been here? She asked. Not long, he said, but long enough to notice you seem a bit down. Had he seen the webbing? Well, I'm okay, just tired, she said. That wasn't a complete lie. His eyebrows met in a look of concern. He wasn't convinced. She knew that she looked even more ridiculous with the gloves to hide her webbed fingers. She wanted to confide in him, to talk to somebody about her problems, but she couldn't risk it. No one could see her like this. Not that he hadn't seen her in a worse state. He had saved her from drowning in the ocean, after all. But still. I've got to go, she said. And with that, she bolted down the hall, leaving Enrique alone.